What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're taking a look at Dune Awakening and a message from the creative director Joel on as a sort of a response to his answer session on Reddit that I don't think went very well for the Dune the Dune development team. Mostly, in my opinion, it came across as very smug and condescending, and it didn't really seek to address any issues, and instead came across very much as deal with it to the player base, and especially the PVE player base. And I think it kind of went off the rails, in my opinion, from there. So luckily we did get a follow-up from him on that one. So let's jump in and we'll take a look at those things, and we'll talk about how they were addressed inside of the AMA as well. So number one, right off the bat, we get this notice right here in big bold letters. Their goal was never to force PvE players to interact with a PvP system that they may have no interest in. Unfortunately, with his AMA, that's exactly how it came across. While they talked about how the deep desert was supposed to be part of the in-game loop of, you know, players go out there, they harvest materials, they compete for those materials, and every week the deep desert is recycled in a new way, so it keeps it more engaging for you to basically make these trips out to the deep desert and grind these resources and find new points of interest. Unfortunately, the ways that is working on iteration isn't that way. He makes this real funny comment here where Stephen King says, wish in one hand, shit in the other, see which one fills up first. And he's, to his displeasure, has a lot of shit inside of his hands and not many wishes. And that's because people had been telling this development team since the beta that, you know, the deep desert concept was just not going to work. Everyone has said that there has been enough games out there that try to develop systems like this with this PvP focused in-game loop that just weren't going to work. So why are we trying to reiterate what's essentially already there, and knowing that's working, and try to take this different approach as if though it was somehow going to work? And unfortunately, it's devolved into exactly what people thought the deep desert would be. So they specifically say inside here that they're looking for the deep desert now to focus on being flagged as partial warfare PvE type areas, while the deepest parts of the deep desert will remain as they currently are, with high rewards, high risk areas. You're just going to run into a bit of a problem with this, because the way they essentially want to do this is, I get it, there needs to be a feeder system here where the deep desert, we're going to flag PvE areas so players can go out and get their T6 resources without having to worry about having to engage in a conflict. The deep desert will still remain the same, where lance ride control points, shipwrecks, and then large spice fields will remain PvP flagged areas. The problem with this is that you still leave this area where PvP becomes a constant in that area by default. And when you have that by default, what you will always have is these large Zerg guilds who are going to go to those areas, maintain supremacy in those areas, and then attack anyone who comes into the areas. You're not creating a controlled aspect of play here. It's bear in mind that it seems as if though they have no idea, one, about what combined arms really looks like. Two, they have no seemingly like information, despite all the information that exists, on how these systems can be implemented in a better way than what they are doing, which is just absolute free-for-all in the deep desert, as a way to control the engagements and give those PvPers something that they want, while also maintaining the aspects of what could amount to being griefing away from that area or those things. So by admitting, they do say that the beauty of the deep desert design is the weekly resets and renewals, and I agree with that. It should remain that way. There should be some competition for resources. It should be some PvP engagement, but it has to be controlled. It can't just simply be that you want all lance ride control points, shipwrecks, and things like that to just simply be PvP and not have like this funneled event to it. You can look at plenty of games, and most of the games where they are implementing PvP type style activity, they either fall by the wayside because the tryhards and diehards that are going to basically be on the game for 8 to 10 hours a day, they quickly move on to something else, or the deep, you know, they have their fun with the game because it's going to be PvP and we just grind it out, and then they leave. And the PvE players are then left picking up the pieces like, hey, where the hell is the end state of this game because you focus so much time on the PvP. They could fix this system immediately. So they say PvP, and they've acknowledged that the PvP in and of itself has issues, and they want to change. The first thing is to change this to Scout Ornithopters. So they specifically say Scout Ornithopters with rocket launchers attached are going to have their speed maneuverability reduced, because right now, because of your bad iterative design, you've given nothing and no reason for people to go after assault ornithopters, because they can do it with these scout ornithopters. Rockets that are going to be fired from scout ornithopters are going to have their increased heat generation. And then you can see here, thrusters will provide a max speed bonus regardless of the wings, ensuring that the scout ornithopters are the fastest vehicles in the game. This would have went a long way to what the design seemingly was around, where if I was a solo or duo player, I can basically get in a Scout Ornithopter, rush with my little equipment, whether it's my compactor, my industrial compactor, or whatever, and I could get out there, maybe make a hit and run, and then fly out. And then if I had, 4 or 5 people that were coming in that area with assault ornithopters, I knew, hey, time to pack up and go, because the resources mean that you're going to either have to fight for this, or you're going to have to freaking take what you got and be happy with what you got and run. I don't see a problem with that style rat play, but you just didn't have that ability, because now you got Scout Ornithopters keeping up with Scout Ornithopters and able to shoot. And so now I can just have a guild with 4 or 5 Scout Ornithopters, 4 or 5 Assault Ornithopters, and they basically just hunt me down for minimal rewards. It didn't work out. So you can see they specifically mentioned the intended dynamic was that you should be able to escape, but that's the intended dynamic, but you failed at it. You need to be adjusting on the fly for that really quickly. The deep desert becomes a place where people battle it out under specific objectives: unburied testing stations, shipwrecks, resource-focused islands, and of course, spice blows. Yes, this works, and it should be about this, but those have to be controlled objectives, controlled timing of PvP, because free for all means that somebody just basically goes out there on a Tuesday when the Coriolis storm hits, set up shop, and then they just basically shoot everybody down coming into the area. And it gets into this point where they talk about combined arms, specifically where the Ornithopter is ruling the roost with its ability to do damage and affect the ground combat activity. This in and of itself tells me that these people have no clue about what combined arms really is in the modern age. If you invest in any type of air activity, air engagement, whether you're going to F-35 or whatever you're doing, guess what? You're probably going to rule the roost. You know what counter systems are for those? Ground-based radars. Ground-based rocket launchers, and missile defense, things like that. Rocket missiles, those are the things that are basically going to stop those. UASs, drones, and things like that are able to target and shoot out of the sky, these type things. But guess what? You don't have those inside Dune. Now, they mentioned inside the AMA that they want to introduce this rocket launcher or whatever, but guess what? It's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough, because essentially in your mind, what you've done is you wanted to create a combined arms type game where combined arms can't exist. If you look at the Dune universe, most of the stuff that was happening on Arrakis was guerrilla type warfare. It's not combined arms type warfare, because while you're out in the deep desert, if you notice inside the movies, they did it, and even the books, is bombing of sieges. It's small ground combat with limited engagement activity, because guess what? When you're fighting on the desert floor, you have to cognizantly be aware of all of the worms that you could be attracting. So if I take a sand crawler, I take a buggy, equip it with a rocket launcher or something like that, guess what those things are going to have to worry about? The worm on the ground. Is going to limit the combined arms that can happen on the ground. And then when you add in an ornithopter that's basically, attacking from the sky, you take away the combined arm aspect of what's happening. The combined arms essentially centered around city and tile sets where you could have some type of combined arm action, where it could be troop on troop. But having a ground-based buggy or, sandcrawler or something like that equipped, or having tanks that they plan on introducing, how does that work? How does that work on a desert floor where, the lava is hot, and at the same time, the worm is coming up through the lava to attack you? There's not a place for this. guerrilla warfare should have been the focal point. It should have been small scale engagements, and then have it focused around maintaining tile set supremacy when you basically say, hey, there's a new land strat activity, and this tile set over here is where you're going to be able to capture that. The person who owns that tile set, or the guild that owns that tile set, or the group that owns that tile set, is going to be able to figure out what that activity is, so then they can start growing to make the grind that maybe is either turning in a quest activity, turning in resources, or building something. But that's not what it is, and we end up in this loop where you don't have a combined arms system. We're gonna end up driving towards that point, because apparently we're dealing with people that don't understand combined arms, specifically within inside of an environment where they can't. It'd be like if I was to say, I'm gonna go to the desert here in the Middle East or something like that. It's bad choice right now given everything going on. But I was gonna go over there and I was gonna put something down that just could not survive that terrain. That's essentially what you're saying. I'm gonna put a tank down, and a tank should not survive that terrain because the worm is gonna come and eat it. I'm gonna basically have a launch ornithopter that can basically come and pick up the tank every 5 minutes. Because that's what we're basically talking about. Combined arms doesn't make sense inside this. It should have been focused around small scale DMZ like guerrilla warfare type activity of being able to say, well, hey, shipwreck is over here. We need to basically be quick about it. So I'm going to just deploy 4 or 5 bodies from the guild to basically go on site, and they can basically try to resource grind, and they fight basically until the worm can get there. Maybe I, attrit some people, maybe I don't, but I basically able to gain the resources. But we're not there. And I get it. They're going to monitor this stuff to see it, but there should be enough history modeling from other games to basically inform this. So you can see here, they want the quest system to be tied to the Lancerat system, even for PvE players. But the problem is that a lot of those hand-ins are just crafting type requests, and they plan on changing those for later iterations when they introduce more content and activities. But the problem is now you're dealing with the complaints of people right now, because those things should have been baked into the way you did the Lancerat activities. It should not have been the Lancerat says I need such and such, and then you have your solos, duos, trios, quads, and so forth like that are playing the game, and they can't contribute to that system because now you've basically locked them out. The framework that holds the end game's activity in place doesn't work, and the end game activity is not there, and it just feels very lack of thought to basically impose that system. So they're going to keep adding in-game activities and more PvE content. They did talk about this in the AMA. There will be more Haga Basin-like zones for PvE. There will be, engagement zones inside the deep desert with PvE. So they're not planning on leaving the PvE players behind. But I think that was the message that basically came out. So specifically inside some of the things that they said in the AMA, we know that they're planning on making changes for PvE players. Like, they wanted to add the Fremen sand walking inside the game. They wanted to add dungeons with bosses and stuff like that into the game that were PvE. They want to help fix out the building and base design that they have for, having to demolish items and be able to build things and be able to lock and things like that for when you're, auto snapping for your builds and stuff like that. They want to add in-game PvE access to like the land strat and stuff like that and fix those things. They want to make sure that PvE players are part of the in-game activity, but I don't think that they're doing it in a proper way because they haven't created a proper funnel system to get to that end game where you feel like, hey, I should join a group. Hey, I should join a guild. But it can't just simply be you've given most players no reason to join Harkonnen because they just look terrible inside the game. And I don't mean like look terrible in terms of like the game graphics. I mean, they just look like the enemy. They look like sadistic people. I mean, go to Harko base and guess what? I'm seeing a bunch of white bald-headed type antagonists inside this area where they basically look like slavers. They look like the enemy. They look like the criminal. They look like the bad guy. And the worst type of bad guy, to join them just doesn't make sense other than to be like, I'm going to join them to just unlock the rewards from it. And then I'm going to betray them and I'll go Atreides because at least these guys look and feel clean. So it's a weird management inside of what you've done because you've given players other than to just grind out that limited time. No reason to basically go in and be like, I want to join the Harkonnen for long-term objective. I thought about joining the Harkonnen so that way I could specifically I'm on the Harkonnen side or whatever. But the moment I got to Harko Village, I was like, nope. not here. The moment you play through the actual story, you go, nope, not me. Like, what does it say about a person that's willing to join the Harkonnen inside here? People like that don't really exist. There's a reason why they're in fantasy, and they don't really exist. Like, go read like the actual Dune series and see how bad Baron Harkonnen and the Harkonnens come across. These guys are not people that you basically like. They're made to be the equivalency of evil immediately when you meet them inside the books. They're not very hospitable people. They're not very like, there's no conscience to this level of evil where it's like you may have some good intention here. No, there's no good intention basically at that camp. So joining them makes no sense. And I think we're going to see more of that inside the in-game activities where people just like, yeah, I joined the Harkonnen simply so I can get the rewards from being a Harkonnen, and then I'm going to betray them and I'll move over to the Atreides. You should have had that third faction immediately on release, so that way people can get a better understanding, whether that's going to be the Fremen, smugglers, or whatever it is. That would have been more explanative. I don't think that they did a great job with the AMA, but I'm appreciative of the fact that they followed up and gave a better, clearer vision of the future, especially for people like myself who are currently playing solo, so that way we can build towards knowing that there's something at the end for me in terms of PVE content. I do want to engage in PvP. I have no problem engaging in PvP areas. I have no problem engaging in rat-like activities where I'm just basically getting in and getting out and getting what I got and basically grinding out that stuff because I'm a solo player and I don't want to join any of these high Zerg guilds. Eventually, that's what's going to end up happening. I'll love to see how they're going to reflect on this, but what I'm seeing is a development group that has no clue about the difference between guerrilla warfare, combined arms warfare, aviation dominance. I could go down the list for this stuff to talk about it, but there's no concept understanding of modern warfare if they think that the ornithopter and the assault ornithopter are not going to dominate in a landscape where you basically have a ground combat element that doesn't exist because of the dangers of putting a ground combat inside those environments where a worm will always be the ruler of that area. It will always be the natural predator, and you're dealing with the sand floor as well. It doesn't work. There's no way that you get that. You need to focus more on the guerrilla warfare type aspects, quick hits, timed events, so that way players can do the things that they're doing for PvP in those areas, and then you can hold back like the worm and make it like general, random time for when those worms happen, or it has to be something like that. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Until next time, guys, peace.